So welcome to another educational and inspiring AAM workshop. This workshop is entitled The Plant-Based Treaty with Anita Krajnc. There has never been a more urgent need for a plant-based treaty. Animal agriculture alongside fossil fuels is a driving force behind potential catastrophic climate change. The grand strategic objective of a plant-based treaty is to develop a plant-based food system that would enable us to live within our planetary boundaries and reforest the earth. Modeled on the fossil fuel treaty, a plant-based treaty aims to create bottom-up pressure by getting endorsements from millions of individuals, tens of thousands of groups and businesses, and dozens of cities. My name is Michelle Granberg. I'm your moderator. I'm a mentor and team member with Animal Activism Mentorship. I'm located in New Jersey, USA, and I've been a vegan and activist for almost 6 years. AAM's mission is to eradicate violence and build a culture of empathy and compassion, which ultimately results in animal liberation. We strive to build a global community of activists through our free online program that pairs experienced activists with aspiring activists. Through one-on-one mentoring, we strive to generate an increased number of effective activists worldwide because we know that this movement needs more activists. Additionally, we offer free workshops that train and educate our mentors, mentees, and the public on various aspects of AR activism. We have a podcast called the Animal Liberation Hour, and we host live large-scale activism events. AAM is also proud to be fueled by FARM, the Farm Animal Rights Movement, one of the oldest AR organizations in the country. So that being said, if you're interested in applying to become a mentor or mentee or want to get more involved or to donate, please visit our website, animalactivismmentorship.com, and follow both AAM and FARM on social media. Now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. Anita Krajnc is Executive Director of the Animal Save Movement, a worldwide network of save groups bearing witness to farmed animals and promoting veganism and love-based grassroots activism. Anita oversees the animal, climate, and health save branches and helps coordinate global campaigns such as the Plant-Based Treaty. She's going to tell us all about the Plant-Based Treaty tonight, and after her presentation, we will then open up for questions and answers. So save your questions and you can raise your hand at the end. We'll let you know. And now I'm going to turn it over to Anita.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And thank you to Animal Activist Mentorship for this great opportunity to talk about the Plant-Based Treaty. So can everyone see my screen? Is it good? Okay, great. So it is code red for humanity. Greenhouse gases are accelerating, and we are seeing climate impacts with rising temperatures. We are heading towards planetary breakdown. Even if we ended fossil fuel use today, the food system alone would send us over 1.5 degrees Celsius warming. The solution, at least part of the solution, is the Plant-Based Treaty. It offers a logical pathway to averting a climate catastrophe. In this first slide, I have a QR code. If you scan this code, it will take you to the homepage where you can endorse the treaty. I'll put the same QR code on a couple of times during this presentation. The Plant-Based Treaty is modeled on the popular fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, which was created by environmental groups. We are replicating the idea of creating bottom-up pressure for national governments to negotiate a global agreement to shift to a plant-based food system. Along with phasing out fossil fuels, the transition to a plant-based food system would enable us to live within planetary boundaries. Here's a timeline. So the idea of the Plant-Based Treaty came about a year ago when we met with Sephora Berman, who's the chair of the Fossil Fuel Treaty. She explained to us the importance of targeting powerful government actors. We had called her up asking, how can we put animal agriculture on the global agenda? And then she showed us the Fossil Fuel Treaty. Within 4 months, we were able to launch our website and hold actions in dozens of cities worldwide. apologies. Almost immediately, 2 cities endorsed the treaty, Rosario, which is one of the largest cities in Argentina, and Boynton Beach in Florida. And then subsequently, 12 cities in India also endorsed. In November, we took part in the COP, the Conference of the Party negotiations in Glasgow. We campaigned both inside and outside the conference. And currently this year, we're focusing on launching city campaigns. So in this presentation today, I'll focus a lot on the city campaigns. So the fossil fuel treaty has 3 broad principles, and the plant-based treaty sort of replicated that. So what we call the 3 R's. Relinquish, relinquish, redirect, and restore. So the first R is don't make the problem worse. So specifically, stop the problem from getting worse by halting any new greenhouse gas emissions coming from animal agriculture. So that would mean no new deforestation, no new animal farms, no new slaughterhouses for expanded agriculture. The second R is redirect. And that means promoting a shift away from animal agriculture to a plant-based food system by using policy tools such as subsidies, taxes, and public information campaigns. So for example, you could have a public information campaign that helps persuade people to understand the benefit of eating a plant-based diet from a planetary health, equity, and animal protection perspective. The third R is restore. It's about healing the planet and restoring carbon sinks. This includes reforestation of forests, peatlands, and mangroves, returning lands to indigenous peoples, and creating organic community gardens and orchards to ensure a fair and accessible food system. So this pyramid shows the different parts of this overall campaign. So the grand strategic objective is to develop a plant-based food system so that we can live within our planetary boundaries. And there are 3 phases: relinquish, redirect, restore. And within each of the 3 R's, you can have many campaigns. So already we've launched some campaigns for relinquish. One is stop animal gifting. So we're targeting charities like Oxfam to stop spreading animal agriculture around the world through animal gifting. We have another campaign called Stop Octopus Farming. There's a proposal to set up an octopus farm on the Grand Canary Islands. In terms of redirect, we are partnering with plant-based universities in the UK to try to get a university to go fully plant-based. We're working on plant-based cities campaigns. We partnered with Friends of the Earth US on a divestment campaign. In terms of restore, we're working on community gardens. In Argentina, they set up a couple of community gardens outside soup kitchens, and they're expanding that program this year. And we're going to try to implement that in other parts of the world as well. And we engage in a lot of food giveaways. And then there are multiple tactics that you can use for each of these campaigns. So here again is the QR code if you'd like to point your phone at it, and it will take you to the homepage where you can endorse the treaty. So you can endorse the treaty as an individual, group, business, or city. And so what we're doing is forming a coalition in each city so that we can work together and pressure cities to endorse the plant-based treaty. By collecting all these endorsements, we show that there's an appetite for a plant-based treaty. And ultimately, we want to pressure national governments to negotiate a global treaty. So this was the first part of the presentation. It's just an introduction, a general introduction of the plant-based treaty. I now want to focus on our cities campaign. We are inviting your city to formally endorse the treaty. But to do that, you need to mobilize and individuals, groups, businesses to put pressure on city politicians. Why focus on city campaigns? Well, historically, many changes start with local resolutions before becoming global treaties. For example, in the case of protecting the ozone layer, it started with initiatives in Oregon where the state banned aerosols in 1977. And then 10 years later, we got the Montreal Protocol, which banned CFCs to protect the stratospheric ozone layer. City governments are typically more responsive to citizen pressure, or because council members are part of your local community and easier to reach. And wards or districts are smaller than ridings or however you describe your jurisdiction. Cities have substantial control over greenhouse gas emissions. Many towns and cities have influence over food served in schools, hospitals, prisons, and care facilities, as well as street festivals and city catered events, meetings, and functions. Also, cities would be highly vulnerable to climate impacts from killer heat waves, air pollution, power failure, sea level rise, flooding, infrastructure failure, and economic impact. For example, deadly heat waves have killed 700 people, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in the US. Last year, air pollution is often worse on hot days and can cause respiratory problems. In New York, there were power outages last year because of excessive heat in conjunction with excess demand for electricity. Also, when there's heat waves, it makes it more difficult for power plants to operate because they depend on cold water. Sea level rise, flooding can wreak havoc on city houses and infrastructure. We see, the hurricanes have caused flooding in the New York subway system. There could be infrastructure failure. There could be blowout of bridges and roads and inundating of water treatment plants. Asphalt can melt in excess temperatures. Rail tracks expand. So like the train system cannot run when there's a heat wave. In the case of airports, airplanes couldn't take off from Phoenix Airport when the temperature exceeded 118 Fahrenheit because the air was too thin. And in terms of economic impact, there's enormous economic impacts on when you calculate all of this together. 55% of the world's population lives in urban areas, and that will increase to 68% by 2050, according to projections by the UN. This is a map the NASA has set up where you could go to your particular city if you live on a coastal area and get much more detail on what sea level rise would mean for your city. And nearly 11% of the global population, almost 1 billion people, live in cities at risk from sea level rise. So what this means is that it will cause cascading and compounding impacts, such as loss of coastal ecosystems and their services, groundwater salinization, flooding, and damage to infrastructure. So there's a key report by a group called Climate Action Tracker, and this is as covered by The Guardian. It's one of the most respected climate analysis coalitions. And Bill Hare, the chief executive, said, "We are concerned that some countries are trying to portray COP26, that's in Glasgow, as if the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit is nearly in the bag, but it's not. It's very far from it, and they are downplaying the need to get short-term targets for 2030 in line with 1.5. So 1.5 degrees Celsius is what the Paris Agreement set as an upper limit in terms of not passing that warming, because it would be disastrous for small island states, and also put us, and if we head towards 2 degrees Celsius, that would be catastrophic, because we would then be passing a lot of tipping points. So here's I just wanted to show you this chart. It's from the Climate Action Tracker. And on the left, you can see the targets that some governments have set. And the targets are so poor, they're so weak, that it looks like we're going to be heading to 2.7 degrees Celsius warming. And there you see at the top, it says where we were pre-industrial average. So if we set that as 0, where we are now, the world has already warmed by 1.2 degrees Celsius. And it looks like we're heading towards 1.5, but even past 2 degrees Celsius, which would be catastrophic. So as I mentioned, we were in Glasgow at COP, and we have this inflatable cow, which says endorse the plant-based treaty. And on the other side, it says stop animal farming. And in the backdrop, you see the front of the Scottish event campus. So the next series of images, I'm going to show you what sea level rise would look like for different warming scenarios. So that's Glasgow, present day Glasgow on the left. In the center, if it was 1.5 degrees Celsius, you see the sea level rise. If it was 3 degrees Celsius, it would be, as you can see, it would really inundate that conference center. The warming would take place over decades and centuries, but we might already be committed to 1.5 degrees Celsius in a few years, the way things are looking. But that sea level rise would take place over time. And this is a map of Glasgow. So, if you know the city, then it's meaningful to you to see the actual maps. Here you see Los Angeles, Marina del Rey for 1.5 and 3 degrees Celsius. Here's a map. Here's London, that's Buckingham Palace for 1.5 and 3 degrees Celsius warming. And here's a map of London showing you the areas that would be inundated. This is Buenos Aires, New York, Statue of Liberty, National Monument. There's a map. So this is from Climate Central, and they did this for about 200 cities, so you could check if your city is covered. There's Mumbai. There's Victoria, Canada. That's the legislative building, sort of the provincial government building. There's The Hague, Peace Palace. And so what we're trying to show through the plant-based treaty is that moving to a meat and dairy-free diet is necessary to save the world from the worst impacts of climate change. And the author of this study for UNEP is the UN Environment Program, said that animal products were more harmful in terms of emissions of greenhouse gases than the production of sand, cement, plastics, or metals, and adding that biomass and crops for farmed animals were as damaging as burning fossil fuels, such as coal and oil. So with respect to animal agriculture, there are two sort of negative consequences. One is the emissions, and then the other one is the destruction of forests to grow cropland and crops for animal feed and for ranching. So the report states that animal products, both meat and dairy in general, require more resources and cause higher emissions than plant-based alternatives. So in Western countries, cow flesh consumption needs to fall 90%, according to this study, and be replaced by 5 times more beans and pulses. Food production already causes great damage to the environment via greenhouse gas emissions and deforestation and water shortages from farming, and vast ocean dead zones from agricultural pollution. So the author, one of the authors of the study is Professor Johan Rockström, and he said, greening the food sector or eating up our planet. That is what is on the menu today. So we have that choice. So this is one of the most famous studies by Joseph Poor and Nemesek. Joseph Poor wasn't vegan when he did the study, but after doing the study, he went vegan. So it's the biggest analysis ever that looks at the huge footprint of farmed animal exploitation. The Nemesek study was published in the journal Science, and it created a data set based on 40,000 farms in 119 countries and covered 40 food products that represent 90% of all that is eaten. So it assessed the full impact of these foods from the farm to the fork or the plate on land use, climate change emissions, freshwater use, and water pollution, that is eutrophication, and air pollution, acidification. So one of the big findings was that farmed animals exploitation provides just 18% of calories, but takes up 83% of farmland. So out of all the land that's used for agriculture, more than 3/4 is just used for animal agriculture. And yet it provides so few calories. Some of the other findings that I'd like to highlight is, also that it produces a small percentage of the protein given how much land use it uses. And Joseph Poor said, just get a quote from him here, a vegan diet is the single biggest way to reduce your impact on the earth, not just greenhouse gases, but global acidification, eutrophication, land use, and water use. And Professor Joseph Poor is at Oxford University. He said, it is far bigger than cutting down on your flights or buying an electric car. And this is one of the most important charts or figures in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report. So they have 3 working groups, one on science, one on impacts, and one on policy, or what they call mitigation and adaptation. So this is from the first working group on science, but every single working group says the same thing, which is basically that the vegan diet is the optimal diet. So that is what the science says. So they use the word vegan. They don't use plant rich or any other term because you can define vegan. If you say plant rich, what does that mean? Like a piece of lettuce on your plate? So a lot of environmental groups are going to advocate for plant-rich diets because they don't want to say vegan diets, but that's not the science. That's not scientific. So in this particular chart, it shows if the whole world changed its diet from what it is now to going vegan, it would save 8 gigatons of carbon equivalent each year. A gigaton is like 1 trillion tons. So it's 1,000, a billion, or 1 trillion. So that's what a gigaton is. So that is a lot, because consider that every year humans emit around 50 to 60 gigatons from all sources, fossil fuels and animal agriculture. So this is just for emissions. Plus there would be further savings because if everyone went vegan, land would be freed up. And then we could grow forests and they would create sinks, and then we could absorb more carbon, so that we would even have further savings of about 50, altogether it would be about 50 gigatons a year. If you look at that other diet called climate carnivore, this is defined as people who say they will not eat as much red cow flesh and switch to white pig flesh or white chicken flesh. So that does reduce emissions a little bit, but it's incomparable to the vegan diet. The vegan diet is by far the optimal diet. And if we're serious about the climate crisis, that's what we should be advocating full on. So I'm now going to go into just the what we can do, basically. We want cities to endorse this treaty. Basically, we want them to pass a resolution. So we do have a draft resolution on our website. What happens when they do endorse the treaty is they would write a letter to their head of state to negotiate a global treaty. So for example, in Toronto, where I live, they passed a resolution to support the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty at a vote of 20 to 22. And when they did that, when they passed the resolution, they then said, oh, these are all the things we're doing to reduce fossil fuel use in Toronto. And then they wrote a letter to the prime minister. All the councillors and the mayor sent a letter to the prime minister urging him to negotiate a global treaty. So that would be similar if we succeed in getting Toronto to endorse the plant-based treaty. But there are other actions cities can take, many actions, like declaring a climate emergency, promoting plant-based foods in their climate action plans, shifting city events to plant-based, and doing that in schools, hospitals, and so forth, investing in community gardens and tree planting. We wanted to provide you some examples of what some progressive cities are doing. So a number of cities have passed motions to serve only vegan food at council events. So for example, in Oxfordshire in England, Councillor Ian Middleton said, the council should be promoting healthy plant-based food in the face of evidence about the damage being done on a global scale by intensive meat and dairy production, both in terms of climate change and public health. Helsinki did a similar thing. To help combat the climate crisis, the city will no longer serve meat or cow's milk at council events. They also produced an app called Think Sustainably, which you can use to find restaurants and cafes serving vegan food. Amsterdam also did a similar thing. The city council will serve vegetarian food by default at all its events, thanks to an initiative by Jonas van Lammeren of the Party for the Animals. In Sonington, Australia, this page shows is from the climate action plan that they have, and it shows that how to reduce carbon footprint, including eating there where you see the apple, including eating plant-based. So that's part of their climate action plan. The plant-based treaty is producing a number of guides. So we have a plant-based treaty guide to Glasgow, and Alex Bork is on this call, which he produced that beautiful guide. So he, checked with all the restaurants, and he produces other guides and vegan guides. And so we commissioned him to do this guide for Glasgow during COP, and we printed 30,000 copies, gave it to all the delegates inside, as many as we could, and then Alex left copies at the restaurants. We also have a guide, a vegan starter kit, and we have a guide for nutrition for children. In New York, there are so many exciting initiatives by Mayor Eric Adams. One of them is called plant-powered schools, where more than 1,700 schools will take part in Vegan Fridays as part of an initiative to improve the health of children. They also have introduced other, executive orders promoting plant-based in hospitals and also in grocery stores. And New York City just joined C40. So I'll shortly talk about the C40 initiatives. There's a clear understanding in the world about the need to take climate action. So this map shows the percentage of people around the world that are very concerned about the climate emergency. So one of the actions cities can take are climate action plans. So far, over 2,000 cities in 38 countries have declared a climate emergency. And many of these have then introduced climate action plans, and some of them have included plant-based food in the climate action plan. So that's one of our jobs, is to make sure that the city declared a climate emergency, look at the climate action plan, and try to get city plant-based initiatives there. There are many city associations. One of them is called C40. And the cities who have signed up are committed to taking major climate actions. So it's called C40 because maybe it started with 40 cities, but now it's almost 100 cities. And they're committed to half their emissions within a decade. And they operate on performance-based requirements. They have a Good Food Cities Declaration, which supports a shift to healthy plant-based food. So some members have signed it, including Toronto, where I live. And by 2030, as I said, they're aiming to align food procurement with a planetary health diet, and ideally organic. So the planetary health diet is the Eat Lancet diet. It's mostly plant-based. The majority of the food on the plate is plant-based, and there's just a little meat and dairy. So it's called Eat Lancet, or capital EAT Lancet. And the vegan diet is even better than the Eat Lancet diet, what they're supporting, as we saw earlier from the Ipcc. Another objective of this declaration is to reduce food waste by 50% from 2015 levels, and to work with citizens, businesses, and public institutions to develop a joint strategy for implementing this in their climate action plans. Some of the other cities that have signed the Good Food Cities Declaration include Barcelona, Copenhagen, Guadalajara, Lima, London, LA, Milan, Oslo, Paris, Quezon City, Seoul, Stockholm, Tokyo, and Toronto. So these are some of the C40 cities. So if you want to see if your city is there, so I just included North America, but we have a global audience. So maybe I should have included some of the other regions. And New York City should be added here because they just joined. And there's going to be, they have a summit every couple of years. And the next summit is this October in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So we're going to have some people join there. In terms of the plant-based treaty, our goal is to get 50 cities to endorse by 2023. We already have 14, most of them in India. Is your city next? And so the second last part of this presentation is just to go through some of the steps to set up a city campaign. So, setting up a group, talking to counselors, mapping support, developing some messaging, doing some actions, meeting counselors, developing partnerships with other NGOs, doing a deposition, launching a petition, and then planning for post-endorsement action. So I'll just go a little more detail into each. So the first step is setting up a local group. So we send out a newsletter to subscribers in a city to help form a team. But we also have a form on our website, plantbasedtreaty.org, where you can sign up to form a team, a plant-based treaty team. But once we target a city, we also then send out a newsletter to all the people that signed a treaty in that particular location. So over almost 40,000 people signed the plant-based treaty. So then, then we see how many in New York or whatever the target city is, and then we contact them all and try to set up a team. The next step is emailing the counselors, or in Canada, it's called counselors, and in England, counselors, but in the US, it's council members. We email the council members asking them to endorse the treaty. We send up follow-up emails if we don't get a reply. And in this picture, you see Azul with a politician, Azul and Dario with a politician in the middle. That's in Montevideo, Uruguay. And that's a food truck. So we have a food truck in the Netherlands where people endorse the treaty and get a discount for vegan meals. So the next step is creating a map of how much of support. So all the active individuals, groups, businesses, politicians, celebrities, social media influencers, et cetera, who endorse the treaty in that region, and or who you might want to approach to endorse, and build power. Because you don't only go to the council members and ask for endorsement, you have to show that you actually have support and that you've organized. Then the next step is some messaging. So try to get, there's some general messaging for any city, but then there's also some particular messaging where you could look at the specific impacts for your city. You could, use some of the particular policy tools that might be available and so forth. So when you develop that messaging, then it can be used in petitions, email letters, tweet storms, and so forth. So the fossil fuel treaty, they've always launched a petition campaign when they target a city, and then they get it signed by a coalition of groups. Just to raise awareness about the treaty initiative, it's really a good idea to launch a petition. And then it's really important to find a counselor or council member who can champion the plant-based treaty on your behalf, and talk to other counselors and organize a vote on a motion endorsing the plant-based treaty. Organizing direct actions is really important. So here you see an activist in Chile doing some postering. So we've organized demonstrations outside city halls. We've done food giveaways. We've joined marches, including Fridays for Future marches. And we have a very nice plant-based treaty dance. If you go to the Plant-Based Treaty YouTube channel, it's by Charity Con. And it was a huge collaborative effort with dancers from all around the world, like our activist members dancing. And the video was produced by Hashimi in Japan. So the next step is meet with your politicians. So city lobbying includes perhaps like seeing if there's a vegan green counselor, or if there's a counselor for the environment, requesting in-person meetings to discuss the plant-based treaty, organizing a presentation like this. We actually have a special presentation, a module just for city officials that we're almost finished. And so we're going to make all these modules available on our website to download with speaking points. You can phone your council member and also, promote the petition. Oh, that photo, I should say, I'm sorry. Let me just get back to the photo. That photo is with Aprajita with a mayor in India. So she's been very successful along with Naman and others in getting city endorsements in Gujarat, which is a very heavily vegetarian state in India's northeast. Or is it northwest? Sorry, I'm not sure. Yeah, so you can reach out to parties. So like, it's always important to regroup and make sure you're reaching out to different organizations in the environmental, social justice, women's rights, LGBTQ, racial justice groups, worker rights, and so forth. And then plan a deposition, organize an event outside City Hall to launch the petition. Also prepare post-endorsement actions and letters, so a press release, and if you do get an endorsement. And then it's important to maintain contact with the city to see whether they can implement further policies and ensure they follow through with any pledges that they have made. So that's a great opportunity to look at their climate action plan and to follow through on more efforts. One of the lessons that we learned is persistence is key. Politicians are really busy, and it's important to just be persistent to get their attention. And one example is there's a vegan MP in Bristol, Kerry McCarthy. At first, she ignored the request and declined the request. Then finally, just recently, she accepted and has endorsed the treaty. So our message is try again. And just in conclusion, I'm just going to go over some of the thinking behind the plant-based treaty. So we would like to secure 1 million individual endorsements, 10,000 groups, 10,000 businesses, 50 cities by the end of 2023. The year 2023 is important because that's the year when the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change looks at progress and does what they call a stock take. And so then they will reset their goals and so forth. So we will then reset our targets for the next 5 years. And then again, when they do the next stock take. So far we have almost 40,000 individual endorsements and over 1,000 group and business endorsements together, and then 14 cities have endorsed. And celebrities, we've had more support with this campaign than we've had with Animal Safe Movement. This campaign is not meant to be for any one group. The success of the plant-based treaty depends on coalitions. And that's the same model that the fossil fuel treaty is using. Stand Earth set it up, but it's like a arm's length sort of white label campaign. And so 350.org, Greenpeace, all the groups joined, fossil fuel treaty. So we found that we've been much more successful in joining coalitions, building coalitions, getting celebrity support, getting political support for this campaign that's only a year old than we've had in 10 years with the Animal Safe Movement. So for example, we were really happy to get the endorsement of Paul, Mary, and Stella McCartney, and they issued a written statement calling for politicians to support the plant-based treaty. They said, "We believe in justice for animals, the environment, and people. That's why we support the plant-based treaty and urge individuals and governments to sign it." Moby has been particularly supportive. He issued a video statement backing the treaty, which led to TV and radio interviews. In his video, he said, "We face a climate catastrophe and especially a methane emergency. We can all make a difference, fight climate change simply with diet change. So please join me and endorse and support the plant-based treaty." So on the left, you see a number of singers. We got Anushka Manchanda in India, Rodrigo y Gabriela, their instrumental duo in Mexico, and Miguel, who's on the call today, he secured their endorsement. They won a Grammy Award for Best Instrumental Album a couple of years ago. They're just phenomenal. So I strongly recommend you go to their YouTube channel. Yeah, so we've also have support and endorsement from Ipcc scientists, so they've helped guide us on the science, including Professor Danny Harvey, who's at the University of Toronto, and Dr. Peter Carter. Peter Carter said, "Global veganization is a survival imperative." And then we have the endorsements of a few Nobel laureates. The fossil fuel treaty has over 100 Nobel laureates, including the Dalai Lama. So we said, okay, well, let's try to get some Nobel laureates. So far we've secured 5, including Klaus Hasselmann, who won the Nobel Prize for reliably predicting global warming aspects. We have more than 150 politicians that endorsed the treaty within the first 8 months, including in the UK, the support of 20 MPs who have signed a plant-based treaty motion calling for a transition to a plant-based food system. So they signed a motion to call for a debate. So that has not happened yet. Usually you have to get about 100 MPs to successfully get a motion passed to have a debate in Parliament. Ella Gandhi, Gandhi's granddaughter, signed the treaty. She's a former South African MP. She was kind enough to be interviewed by the Plant-Based Treaty. And so we have a video on our YouTube channel, Plant-Based Treaty. She attracted coverage, including in The Guardian. Emma Lewell Buck, a Labour MP in England, was the one that got that motion, created the motion to try to get a debate. In Mexico City, Senator Jesus Rodriguez joined activists at the launch of the Plant-Based Treaty in August of last year. You can see her in this photo in the center with the hat. She says, to know if someone really wants to fight for justice, you have to see what they eat. We've had political party endorsements from the left to the right. So on the left, we have a Communist Party in Italy. We have a number of Green parties, including the Green Party of the Netherlands endorsed. And then on the right, we have vegan conservatives in the UK that have endorsed. And then on the top row there, you can see a number of animal parties. In terms of NGOs, we have support from vegan groups, as well as environmental groups, including chapters from Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, and Extinction Rebellion, and educational establishments, some school student unions, and the LGBTQ, some groups. The University of Rosario in Argentina was the first university to endorse. They endorsed at the same time as the city. And through our coalition partners, we help each other promote important action and initiatives. Viva in the UK has helped us collect endorsements and supports our Bristol City campaign. We're trying to get the city of Bristol to endorse, and we have a petition trying to secure 3,500 votes so that they're forced to introduce a motion. In Defense of Animals has helped us secure the endorsement from the McCartneys. The Plant-Based Treaty is currently helping the Vegan Society in England collect petition signatures calling for plant-based menus in schools. So they have to collect 100,000 signatures in the UK to try to change the rule, which currently doesn't allow for plant-based menus in schools at the local level. We've had endorsements from a number of businesses, vegan businesses, but also energy companies like Ecotricity, run by Dale Vance, he's a vegan. It's the greenest energy firm in the UK. And Dale Vince his name is Dale Vince, spoke at the COP26 press conference in Glasgow for us. Linda McCartney Foods is a British vegetarian food giant, which sells vegan burgers and sausages in countries like UK, Norway, Ireland, Austria, Australia, South Africa, New Zealand. We have formed partnerships with various businesses. For example, in Canada, we partner with a fast food chain, Odd Burger. We attend the new, Adrian, who's on the call here, she does our marketing. So Adrian, with the help of volunteers, attends new store openings where they collect endorsements and conduct outreach, and they kindly donate all their proceeds from the opening day to our campaign. The Spanish food company Huera invited us to their London pop-up so we could collect endorsements there. And we've also recently collaborated with Happy Cow. So yeah. So just to summarize, the key findings of the Ipcc are that we have code red for humanity. We're heading towards 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2030 in terms of locking us into that warming, even though that warming, the impacts of that warming may take time, but 2 degrees Celsius by 2040, which would be catastrophic. 2 degrees is catastrophic because at that point, you will pass a lot of tipping points. We currently face a methane emergency. And if we deal with methane, we could nip the problem in the bud to some degree, because methane is so potent. So if you decrease methane, it would really buy us some time. And a third of the emissions of methane are from animal agriculture. So if we phased out animal agriculture, it would really help us in terms of addressing the climate emergency. And unfortunately, all 3 greenhouse gas emissions are accelerating. They're not even maintained at current levels. They're actually going up each year. And so we've had the highest emissions ever for methane this year and last year. So as I mentioned, there was 3 working groups for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So one on science, impacts, and policy. And all of them point to the need to address both animal agriculture and fossil fuels, and point and suggest that the vegan diet is the optimal diet. So lead reviewer of the first working group, which is the working group on science, Durwood Zalke, believes that cuts to methane are our best hope of limiting temperature rises over the next 20 years. So we need to urgently shift to both plant-based diets and a green energy system. So why do we need a plant-based treaty? The climate emergency is here. It's already here, and it's being felt all over the world. There's only a small window of opportunity left to prevent 1.5 degrees temperature rises. So we're now at a crossroads. We either start implementing solution rapidly, or we walk down the path to oblivion. The plant-based treaty and the fossil fuel treaty lay out solutions. Science is on our side. We just need full participation and political will. Climate impacts are already here and will get worse, but every increment of a degree brings worse devastation. So there's always something to fight for. So we should fight for the prevention of every little increase in temperature, because it makes a difference. And we need both individual diet change and food system change. Governments need to stop funding our own extinction through subsidies and tax breaks, and redirect financing to plant-based solutions and to soft energy. So thank you very much. And I just end on the slide where you can, if you're interested you can scan the code and you can endorse the treaty. So that just takes you to the home page, and you can endorse as an individual, group, or business. And you just point your phone, and then it will take you to the home page. And then I have one more slide which shows you another action you can take. It will take you to a different page. If you want to ask your city to endorse, you can go to this page and send a letter to your councilors. Yeah. So I'll stop sharing, and at some point, if it's possible, I'd like to show the website a little bit, but if there's time. But yeah, if there are any questions.
Yeah, we'll put the website in the chat as well. So Anita, that was just great work. I mean, very inspiring, and the urgency for this is clear. And we hope so people will follow up after tonight with a call to action. So now it's you guys' turn to ask questions of Anita. Who has a question? Just go ahead and hit the hand raise icon, and I'll call on you. So Kelsey, you're first. Go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, so thank you. This was really interesting. I really appreciated the talk. I'm glad I was able to make it. I was just wondering what if any outreach, sorry, I wrote down my question here, there has been to animal rights and environmental groups that exist on college campuses. I imagine that mobilizing groups that already exist on college campuses would go a long way to helping with the plant-based treaty.
Yeah, that's it. That's a great question. So we're partnering with plant-based universities. It's an offshoot of Animal Rebellion, and they're running a campaign. They believe it will take 1 year to successfully get a university in the UK to go fully plant-based in all its menus on the entire campus. So we're partnering with them at this stage. So we just launched in August in terms of the website. So we're just beginning to build our campaigns, but I think you're right, like targeting like students and youth is key. And that's why we're partnering with plant-based universities. So that's the step that we've taken so far. Some of our organizers have done presentations in schools, like Aprigida, for example, has gone to schools, got some endorsements there. She also has like a course she offers. I think it's like a 20-hour course where you watch 5 films, including Seaspiracy, Dominion, and others. But yeah, so there are some various initiatives around the world like that.
Great question, great answer. Next is Amy. Go ahead and unmute.
Thanks, Anita. Hi. So you mentioned public education, and I'm wondering what that looks like.
Yeah, so in terms of public education, we're developing all these modules, and we're sort of copying Al Gore's model. He gave 1,000 presentations, PowerPoint presentations, and then the film An Inconvenient Truth showed that. And then he said, well, why not just train the trainers? And he won a Nobel Prize for his PowerPoint presentations and An Inconvenient Truth. And then he spent that money setting up climate reality groups in different regions. And every year he goes to a different city and educates or trains 500 trainers who will then go out and do presentations. So we're going to use that model. And then a second model we're going to use is Adopt a Block. So you can set up a plant-based treaty team via the website, but we're going to very much focus on wards or districts, and so that that activists are politicized, so they're organizing and they're aware of who their council member is, and then they get to meet other people in their own neighborhood, and then do a bunch of different actions like they could have a vegan potluck, they could do some Activism, or do a festival, have a meeting with their council member, do postering and stickering in their block, and we'll provide those resources. So in Toronto, one of our activists, Mary Chris, she years ago she organized in blocks. Like, so I participated in my particular block, and every month she would give us an envelope with stickers, and then it would be a different theme or message, vegan message, and then we would sticker. So it worked in Toronto. Like, we had 50 blocks participate. So we want to sort of replicate that, and the blocks would do more than that. Like, you could do stickering, you could do postering, all those other things as well. So that's going to be another way of education. So it's like, think globally, act locally, and the act locally will include a lot of education within your neighborhood.
Great, thank you.
Question from Jenny McQueen in the chat. I see a few personal challenges people can take. Is challenge 22 the main one you'd promote? And perhaps the PCRM one could also be added.
Yes, so on our website, I don't know if Jenny wanted to say anything about that, but yeah, on our website, we do promote challenge 22. So if you go to resources, so when you sign up or endorse or sign as an individual, it asks you your diet, and about a third of the people are not vegan. And so then they get a special email, which directs them to the resources, including challenge 22 and a couple of others. So yeah, so they get individualized email, which is also tries to educate them on, how they can help through diet change.
Great question. Hope everybody will check out those resources and endorse. Other questions? Kelsey, you have another question?
I do have another question. It's just a clarification about, you said when you were answering my question, that something about a specific member having courses that would allow for public, or maybe it was the question after mine, for public education. If you could expound upon that at all, I'd be interested. Oh, Kat, sorry.
Yeah, so Aparajita which she's with Mumbai Animal Save in India. So she's offers a course that's 20 hours long, yeah, as just the one example of someone that's doing things. And is that the one you wanted to talk about, Aparajita's course?
Yeah, I just thought it sounded interesting.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah. So she has so it involves like 5 films: Cowspiracy, Seaspiracy, Dominion, Game Changers. One other, I can't remember the other one. And then there's discussion on the films after people watch the films. And then they also have specific workshops like on health, environment, ethics. So yeah, I can, if you're interested, I can put you in touch with her.
Yeah, that would be interesting for sure.
And then I guess I connected her with Amy is with the Factory Farm Awareness Coalition, and they have programs as well. So you might want to check that out.
I will, thank you.
Okay, great.
I have a question. Now, there was a lot of information that I didn't absorb everything you said, but it was, thank you very much for your presentation. And like, for instance, the city that I live in, we recently got a new city manager and he's vegan, and he let the community know that he is vegan. And yeah, in the city, it's Santa Monica. There's lots of restaurants here, and the majority of them are like Italian, or they have a lot of animal foods in the restaurants. So that tells me that people really don't care about being a vegan or really want to like change the way they eat. And I personally don't want to tell somebody how to eat, because I find that to be like frustrating, because people it's the hardest thing to change, harder than anything. So I'm a little bit not sure how I could apply these without having to tell people what to eat. I guess if they understand how dire this climate change is, then maybe it'll sink in a little bit, the education part of it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there have been public opinion polls done by Chatham House. It was funded by James Cameron, director of Titanic. They did a study, a multi-country study that showed how aware people are of climate change and the contributions that animal agriculture make. The more people are aware of the connection, the more they're willing to change their diet. So, information is key. And that's why we're doing all these slide presentations. With respect to, how forceful you should be in your, sort of suggestion that people should go vegan. We are facing a climate emergency. And if you look at the campaigns against fossil fuels, there's really strong campaigns. People are getting arrested, trying to stop pipelines. A lot of vegans are getting arrested, like Daryl Hannah got arrested, to stop a Keystone pipeline. And I think, if we use the same standard for how we approach fossil fuels, we should, we're all, we're heading towards oblivion unless people wake up and, quickly phase out fossil fuel and animal agriculture. So we're actually facing an existential crisis. And this presentation just showed you some of the sea level rises impacts. Like, is it easier to change your diet or to have 3 feet of water in your kitchen? And is it right for us to do that to somebody in 10, 20 years and in other countries? And is it okay for us to continue as we are and then have small island states underwater? Their whole island will be underwater. So, we're actually facing a climate emergency. So I think that's the key, is just education. Like I don't think people realize how bad the situation is. There was a comment earlier about the council members not appearing. I apologize. In the US, the company that we work with has not been good on the data for council members for different cities in the US. So we have to manually input it. And so we did it for Berkeley. So if you're from Berkeley and you fill out that, it will work. But we're gonna have to manually input that. And in the UK, we had to anyways. So this company, like, they have data for Canada, the US, and Australia. And then for other countries like Italy, Germany, we actually had to input the data sets for all the council members. So apologies, sorry, I'm just gonna see who wrote, somebody wrote that it did not work. It sent the wrong politician or something. Yeah.
Okay, so that was good question, Carrie. Are you complete with that? And we go on to the next question. Jose, you have your hand up. Go ahead and unmute.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hey, Anita, thank you for the magnificent presentation. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that the plant-based treaty somehow gives land back to the indigenous communities. Can you explain a little bit on that?
So that's an objective. So with the 3 R's, these are just principles that we would recommend that state negotiators take into account if they negotiated a treaty. So we don't actually have we didn't actually provide a draft text for the treaty. All we did was have 3 principles that we believe are necessary, that are science-based, that are ethical, that should comprise a treaty. If you look at the Amazon rainforest, for example, the biggest threat is from animal agriculture, and thousands of activists have been killed, including rubber tappers and indigenous people, by those representing animal agriculture, mining, and other exploitative industries. So under Bolsonaro, the current leader of Brazil, there's been more deforestation of the Amazon than ever. It's really dire. If we follow the plant-based treaty principles, it would mean protecting existing forests and also reforesting the earth, and that would then, protect indigenous peoples, because they're threatened by deforestation.
Okay, thank you, Anita.
Thanks. So I guess
we have a comment question in the chat from Howard. I don't know if you've read that here, Anita, but I was wondering if you could say more about the relationship between campaigning to get municipalities to endorse the plant-based treaty and other municipal plant-based campaigns. So for example, Montreal just became the 2nd Canadian city to join the C40 Good Food Cities campaign, but has not yet, to my knowledge, endorsed the plant-based treaty. Was your thinking that it would be easier to get the city of Montreal to endorse the plant-based treaty? And if so, how?
Yeah, so good question. So we're just beginning to launch city campaigns, and and we're targeting certain cities that we think the prospects are good. C40 cities, and especially cities that signed the C40 Good Food Cities campaign, which is very few cities did that, but they have a stronger commitment to moving towards plant-based foods, would be a good target. So we just started. So we have a campaign that we're just developing in Toronto. We haven't developed a campaign in Montreal yet, but it would be because it is committed to that, it would be a good target. But currently we're targeting some British cities like Bristol, and New York, in the US, New York City, Berkeley, and LA, and in Canada, Toronto, in India, a lot of cities. But basically, we're at the beginning stages of launching these cities campaigns, and what we need to do is create plant-based treaty teams to do it. In terms of the relationship with other campaigns, the ideal is just to partner as much as possible. So just like the fossil fuel treaty, when they launch a campaign to endorse that treaty, they just build a coalition and then try to get endorsement. So for example, in New York City, we've approached Chili on Wheels and New York Class, the group fighting horse carriages, to develop a team and then to recruit other members that are in the vegan community, but also in the social justice community. Like Eloisa has a lot of connections with the like community gardens. She works on them with other social justice groups. So the ideal is just to create these broad-based coalitions that are not just vegan, they're environmental, social justice, and build a team and then fight for plant-based treaty endorsement, but also, for other initiatives.
Perfect. So Amy asked in the chat, are you concerned that Eat Lancet cities will consider themselves done?
Yeah, like it's not the ideal diet. So that's so what we want to really show, because we're facing such a huge emergency. We're developing a module just called Climate Science Module, which will show that repeatedly that all the studies on the food system show that the vegan diet is the ideal diet. And there's a lot of studies showing that in the West, we have to cut our consumption much more because unfortunately, consumption of meat, dairy, and eggs is going up in countries like India, Indonesia, and Latin American countries, partly because multinationals like Cargill, which is based in Minnesota, are promoting meat, dairy, and eggs in these countries. So like Cargill partnered with Heifer International, a horrible nonprofit, to try to get 100 million people in Asia to adopt backyard chickens. So it's sort of like what Nestle did with formula milk. They work with they develop AstroTurf type of grassroots campaigns to spread animal agriculture. So while we see some good news in developed countries, like, oh, veganism is going up and more and more people are going vegan, these companies are targeting plant-based societies and encouraging meat addiction, meat, dairy, and egg addiction there, just like what the cigarette companies did. So we have to be very aware of that and have to, we need corporate campaigns fighting the highly unethical, greedy companies like Cargill.
Amy, you have another question? Or you have to unmute yourself.
If there's anyone else who hasn't asked any questions, yeah, I don't want to dominate. So, okay, well, I was just thinking in terms of the Eat Lancet cities that there would be a way to, so maybe wait a little while and then really congratulate those cities and then ask them to take the next step, which would be plant-based treaty. Also, I'm working currently on a regional approach that involves mainly municipal policies. So it's called Homegrown Bay Area, which is targeting 101 cities and 9 counties in the Bay Area. And I'm wondering whether, with the idea that these cities will cooperate with one another, that they'll benefit from each other's experiences. And I'm just wondering if you had thought about kind of a regional approach in other areas.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That particularly because the cities there are some of the cities outside Berkeley might be more progressive than Berkeley. That's a brilliant approach, homegrown Bay Area. Yeah, and we would love to collaborate with you and with what you're doing. And in the case of other campaigns, like I mentioned, the ozone depletion case, this whole state of Oregon banned aerosols 10 years before there was a global agreement. So yeah, organizing at the city, regional, or state level, is all important in terms of local campaigns. But that's really exciting that you're actually organizing in that way, because it's sort of the different cities are learning from each other and almost competing to do the right thing. So yeah, that's brilliant. But yeah, yeah, so it's a good model. So if you've developed this model, it's something that hopefully other jurisdictions could do in other countries as well.
Thank you, Amy, very much. So in the chat, Matt asks, what can we do to make workplaces and hospitals transition to veganism?
That's another great question. So there are some groups already doing that. So in England, there's Kassam, Dr. Kassam. She organized the first plant-based conference for health professionals. And then her sister near Toronto, she organized the first one in Canada. And in England, that group that she's with, I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the group, but they tried to ban bacon on the menu at hospitals because that was very catchy, knowing that it's a carcinogenic food, according to the World Health Organization. So there are health professionals that are organized and are working on such campaigns. You said, sorry, was it hospitals and workplaces? Yeah, good question. So on our website, like, again, copying the fossil fuel treaty, we have, if you go to the campaign hub, you'll see all the resources we have. And I'm wondering if I could just share, just for a short period, just the website so I can show you. Is that okay if I just show you the campaign hub? So sorry, so here's the plant-based treaty. Let me just move it over so you can see it. Sorry, let me just move that. And then move that. Sorry, but yeah. So if you go to the plant-based treaty, there's a campaign hub. And in the campaign hub, there's various resources like a general endorse invite. Like, say you want to invite a friend, there's a general letter there that you can adapt. So you could just, it's like an elevator pitch. And there's also an actual elevator pitch. Again, Adrian was on the call today. She helped develop that elevator pitch. There's how to write a letter to your editor and so forth. But then there's 18 ways schools can help. 17 ways businesses can help. Like, they're just ideas that you can do. If you open that document, you'll see, all the tips, like how they can invite all their staff to eat vegan, or at the events buy vegan only, or various ways. So anyways, on the campaign hub, there's lots of resources. And we need to develop them further. Like, somebody said, oh, we should get something on veganic farming and so forth, but we don't have that yet. We're currently developing a guide on community gardening and vegan food giveaways. But I'm sure other groups, like, there must be groups that have maybe some tips or guides on that already.
And people are welcome to share in the chat. So let me just read Jackie and Gareth's comment from Vegan FTA. Our esteemed government here in New Zealand recently backtracked from recommending plant-based diets to healthy diets. So disappointing and frustrating. Do you have any advice for how we should approach a government like ours?
Yeah, so we did. We worked with Jackie and Gareth on a tweet storm where we exposed the New Zealand government's watering down of the policymakers summary for Working Group 3. So Working Group 3 is on policy, and when you actually look at the Ipcc report, it's like 3,000 pages long with many chapters. So the report itself will say vegan is will show that the vegan diet is ideal. But then there's a summary which policymakers, the world's policymakers, look at this, what the scientists wrote, and then they negotiate it a bit. So, and then apparently New Zealand was partly responsible for watering down the language in the policymakers report. So then we did a tweet storm. So I think what we could do is expose them. So like when we did target the agricultural minister, the environment minister then tweeted saying he was somebody tweeted apparently some a message from the environment minister who wasn't happy about it. So I think, all we can do is expose that kind of hypocrisy and really, incredibly negative, policy initiatives, because the New Zealand government tries to portray itself as progressive and, environmental, but, it's disgusting that the government was watering down a global report written by scientists calling for plant-based solutions to the climate crisis. Maybe other people have, ideas on what can be done.
Got some ideas coming through the chat, I think, but Ken, you have your hand up for the next question. You can unmute.
Hi there. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to ask about grocery retail stores. Has there been any attempt to try to get a grocery retailer involved? I think that may be a big step. They're huge beneficiaries from the agriculture industry and the oil industry with transportation and stuff. And I just wonder if it would be possible to get in with one grocery retailer, or maybe, try to get into that grocery chain type of thing, and have one of them support the plant-based treaty and start promoting things in their store, making things easier to shop for. One of the biggest difficulties I have is getting plant-based things. I have to go to multiple stores. And so I just wonder, has there been any thought or attempt to try to get a grocery retailer on board? And maybe that would be a good way to push the agenda. So
That's a really good idea. I mean, in Glasgow, we collaborated with Vegan Kind. It's the largest sort of vegan distributor, and they gave us thousands of samples to distribute. In the UK, a lot of groups like Viva, Animal Justice Project have very sophisticated corporate campaigns. And so I think what you're talking about is that kind of sophisticated campaign, which, we're not there yet in terms of our own initiative, but there are groups that are doing that kind of thing, targeting, like looking at the supply chain, looking at how our own grocery stores are contributing to deforestation in the Amazon. A number of groups have shown that, including Greenpeace. But yeah, that's a great idea. But maybe others have better answers for that. But I think that's the right way to head. Like ideally, that's what we're gonna do. But we're not there yet.
Great questions. Hope that means people are getting involved. Any other questions? Howard, you want to ask a question?
Hey, yeah, sorry, I was typing this into the chat, but I think I kind of messed it up when I did. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thanks. And thanks so much for the great talking to you. So what I was asking was just when you're comparing it, plant-based treaty municipal campaign to some of these other initiatives like campaigning for more plant-based procurements, and whether it's through C40 or Eat Lancet or a fully vegan declaration. If I'm not mistaken, the plant-based treaty municipal campaigns are unique in that rather than asking the municipalities themselves to change their own municipal policies directly, like the percentage of plant-based procurements, that they're serving, what they're serving at their city events and so on, it's asking the municipality to ask the country government to take part in negotiating an international treaty. So am I right about that? That's really, if so, that's the distinctive thing you're doing that's very unlike what some of these other campaigns are doing. And if that is correct, then isn't that the best way to explain the main value to a city that's already passed Eat Lancet or C40, that, well, oh, that's wonderful that you're changing your procurements, but look, really, it's so important that we change, but we really need to get everyone to change. And so here's another thing the city can do. It can pressure the country government to negotiate this international treaty, which is really, really this big, huge systemic action that we're trying to get off the ground. That's really important. Is that correct about my understanding of of the campaign? And if so, is that maybe a good way to just explain its the role it plays in the plant-based transition ecosystem?
I think that's a really good elevator pitch. I think we do have two goals. The first goal is the one you defined, which is, creating bottom-up pressure through individual, group, business, and city endorsements for national governments to negotiate a global treaty. So that is the first objective. But as we know, like at COP, there's often very little accomplished. So Greta's conclusion was blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's what was accomplished. And The Guardian as well said that a lot of the work has to be done outside of COP, the official global negotiations. So a second objective is to have a campaign hub provide resources for individuals to do diet change. We have resources for businesses, groups. We have actions cities can take. So we're also doing that. So implementation at the local level. So you're right in sort of highlighting the distinctive feature. And then the second objective is common to like what a lot of groups are doing. And if you look at the fossil fuel treaty, like when Toronto endorsed the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, it did write to the national government and said, negotiate a global treaty. But it also said, oh, we're doing all these things to limit fossil fuel use. So the minimum requirement in a city endorsing the treaty is simply to ask for a global treaty. But just by having that campaign, it sort of encourages the city to think to do more. And that's already happened in a city in England. I don't know if it's Bristol, it might be Bristol, where just by running this plant-based treaty campaign, they set up a working group, to discuss plant-based, policies that could be implemented. So I think in this ecosystem of so many groups beginning to be more political, like all these I'm sure a lot of us have been animal activists, maybe doing street activism or different types of activism, but now we're doing a lot more advocacy, which is a great thing. So activists are becoming more politicized. I think it's good that politicians are getting messages from all sides and sometimes in unison, sometimes a little different, just showing that, we're organized and that, we're really pushing these solutions and that we have some power. But yeah, I think it's a really good question. And yeah, that the primary objective is as you outlined, but I do think there's a second objective, which focuses on implementation at all levels.
Thank you, Howard. I hope that answers your question. So we have time for maybe one more question before we'll start to wrap up. Is there another question or something someone would like to share? Ken, is that you with your hand up again? Okay, go ahead.
Hi again. I just like to comment on the New Zealand thing. I know a few years ago, it may be 10 years ago now, that New Zealand passed some of what's considered the best legislation in the world for animal welfare. And I'm just wondering if there's any way to tie into that. You have a government that's very progressive on animal welfare and then at the same time trying to cover up animal agriculture and its use. And I just wonder if there's any, connection that can be made there, not only in New Zealand, but, in any country.
That's a really good question. So in the global negotiations, COP, Conference of the Parties, like they meet every year in a different city. There's a working group called Cornelia or something like. So I don't have. It's a city in Fuji, Cornelia Agricultural Working Group, and they're the ones that sort of were talking about food solutions, and they were emphasizing an industry agenda, such as rotating fields. So sometimes there's plants and sometimes quote unquote livestock or farmed animals. It's the agricultural ministry delegates that are there. and they have their agenda. And see, that's part of the problem with these global negotiations. It's like, who's on the delegation? And if it's the Ministry of Agriculture, they're often they're very influenced by, animal agriculture, not the plant-based food industry. But the environment ministries are much more sympathetic because they're concerned about the climate crisis. So I think that's what happened in the case of New Zealand. So the environment minister was not happy with, what happened in terms of the watering down of the IPCC reports. So I just think it's one of those battles. So it's just a matter of, I think it's, if we organize and become stronger, and people are more well aware about the climate crisis and the contribution of animal agriculture, then it will be more difficult for ministries of agriculture to undermine any climate solutions.
Okay, Ken, I think your cat agrees. He's endorsing, your cat is endorsing the plant-based treaty right now, I think. So I guess if everybody is complete for now with their questions, this has been wonderful. Anita, do you have some final words?
Yeah, I think we all have more power than we realize. So it's just a matter of exercising it. And I think it's important to become political and to organize. So the more we organize, the more of us that we collectively organize, that's how change happens. It's happened historically that way. I think bottom-up organizing is very important. And, we'd love for you to be part of a plant-based treaty team. We're still getting our act together in terms of like getting a guide for plant-based treaty teams. So, if you message us, it might take a little bit of a while to help set up teams. But we'd really appreciate it if you want to be part of a team, a city team. You can go to the website and under take action, there's a form, there's an action called plant-based treaty team, and then you can fill out a form. Just build coalitions. And it's never been easier to work with other social movements on an issue that we all care about, which is animal rights and climate and health and so forth. So that's the experience we've had with plant-based treaty. It's just easier to get just to work with others and get political support and and to be authentic, like what are your reasons? And what I like about plant-based treaty is it allows that space for people to say, all the win-win or all the good reasons to do the right thing.
Thank you for spearheading such an amazing, cohesive effort and for your presentation. So hold on just for a couple more moments, everybody, because I want to make a few quick final announcements. So we have upcoming workshops. As I said, AAM holds workshops usually a couple a month. June 2nd is our next workshop, which is on filmmaking as activism with Sean Munson, producer of both Dominion and Earthlings. So you'll want to join us for that. June 6th is our security culture, staying safe as an activist workshop. July 9th is our vegan hospitality workshop. August 25th is a workshop on Kaporos activism, and much more to be announced. Also, a couple large live event announcements where activists at all levels of experience are welcome to join us. AAM Chicago Convergence is a 10-day animal rights activism event that will be largely focused on taking action against the fur industry, but also include other types of actions. Dates are July 29th through August 7th. The AAM Ohio Occurrence is a 3-day animal rights activism event in Cleveland, Ohio. This event will feature several different types of animal rights activism, and the dates are September 2nd through the 4th. You can find more information, and we do encourage you to register for these events through our Facebook pages or group, or reach out to us, or if anybody would like to share some of that information in the chat, please do that. Also, you can feel free to post your own Instagram handles in the chat, or direct us to where you're holding any events locally for yourself. And so it's my pleasure to thank all of you for being here, and thank Anita for your time and wisdom, and thank Trey for managing the technical back end, and thank you all for the work you're doing for the annals of this world. If you're interested in becoming a mentor or a mentee, or want to get involved or want to donate, please reach out to AAM, animalactivismmentorship.com. And meanwhile, we'll add you to our email newsletter list to keep up with what we're doing. So thank you, everybody, so much. Thank you for your time and attention. And until next time, stay strong and live vegan, everyone. Thank you.